My name is Leah Schade, and I teach preaching and worship at Lexington Theological Seminary. I want to talk with you about letting go of fear when it comes to addressing the climate crisis and offer you strategies for finding our climate courage in congregations. How do we know that there is fear around addressing climate issues in congregations? Well, I've been conducting surveys of clergy and congregations about ministry, preaching, and social issues since 2017, and they can give us some insights. In 2017, we surveyed more than 1,000 U.S. mainline Protestant clergy. 4 years later, we had nearly twice as many respondents. What we learned is quite interesting. In the first survey, we gave respondents a list of more than 30 topics and asked them to indicate which ones they addressed in their sermons in the previous year. We found that preachers ranked environmental issues as among the lowest priorities to address in sermons. Only about 30% of preachers said they talked about issues such as climate or pollution or species extinction. What are reasons for this hesitancy to address climate and other environmental issues? One reason is because pastors don't want to be seen as too political. And unfortunately, climate change has become a politicized issue. Another reason is that clergy don't want to alienate members of their congregation or risk losing them. Add to this the stress that many congregations are under. Many are facing an aging membership and diminished attendance and funds, buildings in need of deferred maintenance, and many other factors. When congregations are stressed, they are more brittle, as homiletician Lisa Cressman describes it. In other words, they are emotionally fragile and less receptive to hearing about these kinds of issues. All of this leads to pastors who are overwhelmed. There are so many challenges they're dealing with, including white supremacy, political polarization, social unrest, conspiracy theories and disinformation, and of course, the COVID-19 global pandemic. However, there is good news. EcoAmerica has been tracking public opinion about climate change and found that 78% of Americans are concerned about climate change, which is an overwhelming majority. This number has been increasing every year since they've been conducting surveys. I think what we're seeing is that people understand that the climate crisis is real, it's caused by human activity, and it's something that we need to do something about with urgency. Climate is no longer a matter of not in my backyard, because now it's in everybody's backyard, which means that more people are looking for a word from their clergy and guidance for how their congregations can respond. The data from our surveys reflects this shift as well. When we surveyed clergy again in 2021, we saw a 19-point increase in the percentage of clergy who said that they addressed environmental issues compared to 2016. So the good news is that half of clergy in the survey said that they addressed climate or pollution or other environmental issues in 2020. But it also means that we have a lot of work to do to help the other 50% of clergy find their prophetic courage. So what might be strategies that could be helpful? One thing we can do is think about how we talk about climate change in our preaching and teaching. In 2019 and 2020, my team and I surveyed congregants in 10 Disciples of Christ churches in the mid-central US to find out what terms they thought were too political to hear in sermons. Notice that climate change is in the top 10 of the most controversial issues for both years. Environment is further down the list, but still registers as a volatile term. But look at this. God's creation gets the least pushback of any term on that list. So if you're a preacher who wants to address climate change, but you're in a congregation that might react negatively to that term, you can find other ways to talk about protecting the sky and the air and the earth that God has made. What are other strategies for addressing climate and congregations? The most important is to make the case that the Bible itself is steeped in an ethic of creation care. In Genesis chapter 2, for example, humans are told to till and keep the earth as part of their vocation on this planet. In the Gospels, Jesus often points to images from nature to help him teach biblical truths. The Psalms talk about the trees worshiping God. In other words, we need to frame climate as a matter of faith. Another strategy is to connect climate to other issues people care about. For example, most churches have some kind of feeding ministry, helping people see the impacts that the climate crisis has on farms and food production and distribution and hunger is a way to connect the dots between climate, faith, food, health, and community. I also recommend that clergy do more than just preach a single sermon on climate. People want and need to talk about what they can do to respond. So in my book, Preaching in the Purple Zone, I recommend a method called the sermon dialogue sermon process. And when you do this, you can use an issue guide developed by the National Issues Forum Institute called Climate Choices to help people think about different approaches to addressing climate issues. One of the most important things churches can do is to lift up stories of people who are protecting God's creation. We need to cast a vision of justice, equity, and community to inspire our congregations to join in this challenging yet joyful work of restoring God's creation. In an effort to encourage clergy to preach and teach on Christian ecology at least once a month, I've partnered with the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development, and we've created a new free resource called EcoPreacher 123. Drawing from EcoBible, which is a Jewish ecological commentary on the Hebrew Scriptures, we provide ideas for preaching about caring for God's creation in a short, accessible way that's based on solid biblical foundations. EcoPreacher 123 offers a brief eco-exegesis for interpreting a Hebrew text from the Revised Common Lectionary for that Sunday. This is followed by one eco-idea for the basis of the sermon, 2 eco-questions that go deeper, and 3 eco-actions to choose from to help a congregation put their faith into action. With this resource, preachers can use their sermon to help ideas germinate in their congregations. They can use this resource in their own context and make it relevant for their congregations. You can visit Interfaith Sustainability and look up EcoPreacher 123 to sign up for your monthly installment. Remember that your preaching and teaching about the climate crisis makes a difference. People are listening. And when we practice prophetic courage, we can be part of God's work to protect people and planet. Next, we'll hear from Ruth Ivory Moore on the topic of climate advocacy in fossil fuel country.